A guy named Marcus once bragged to me that he beat a car dealership at their own game. He walked out paying only $40 over what the manufacturer charged. The salesman actually sighed and said the store was basically eating a loss on the sale. Marcus drove home grinning like he'd cracked a code nobody else knew existed. He hadn't. That same dealership still walked away with roughly $2,900 in profit off his purchase, and he never saw a cent of where it came from. Here's the part that gets people. His neighbor Jordan saw the car sitting in the driveway a week later, loved it, drove to that exact same store, bought the exact same model, and paid $2,250 more. Same building, same salesperson team, within the same 30-day window. The car didn't change. The price didn't change because of the car. It changed because of 4 words Jordan said before he'd even sat down. Cash buyer, best price. There are roughly a dozen profit layers stacked into every single car deal, and almost nobody buying a car has ever heard of most of them. The layer that costs you the most isn't even negotiated on the showroom floor. It's waiting in a small office you get walked into after you think you've already won. Let's take this apart piece by piece. Marcus wasn't an impulse buyer. He'd spent months getting ready for this. He pulled pricing data from an independent research site, found what's called the manufacturer invoice, which is the number the factory bills the dealership, and walked in already knowing more than the average shopper ever bothers to learn. The window sticker on his car read $31,400. The invoice price sat at $29,100. He spent almost 90 minutes going back and forth with the salesman, who made every $100 concession feel like surgery without anesthesia. By the end, Marcus had the number down to $29,140, $40 above invoice. The salesman leaned back in his chair, sighed, and said something like, "Honestly, we're barely breaking even here." Marcus floated out of that building feeling like he'd out-negotiated the whole industry. And if that $40 gap were the only profit the dealership made, he'd have been right to celebrate. A $40 margin is basically nothing. Here's the catch, though. That number is the only slice of the deal you're ever shown. It's the surface. Underneath that surface sit at least 11 other layers of profit, completely invisible to the buyer, engineered into the structure of every car sale that happens in that building, every single day. Now fast forward a week. Jordan, the neighbor, gets home from work, spots the new car, wanders over, asks what it is, tells Marcus he's loved that model for years. Marcus tells him where he bought it. That Saturday, Jordan drives to the same dealership, asks for the same trim, same color even. He drives away having paid $2,250 more than Marcus did for an identical car. And Jordan, just like Marcus, walked out convinced he'd landed a solid deal. We'll circle back to Jordan in a minute, but first you need to see the machine that ran quietly underneath both of their purchases, because it's the same machine, and it never once showed itself on paper. Start with what Marcus actually had, that invoice number from the research site. Useful, sure, because at least he had a floor to work from. Most buyers never even get that far. They walk in with a number stuck in their head, and if the salesperson lands anywhere near it, they feel triumphant, whether or not that number ever reflected reality. Here's what the research sites never tell you, though. The invoice price is not the dealership's true cost. The real cost sits lower, sometimes a lot lower, because of private financial arrangements struck directly between the manufacturer and the dealership. None of these arrangements show up on a public pricing tool. Not the popular consumer sites, not the loan calculators, not the trade-in estimators. None of them. The first of these hidden transfers is something called a holdback. After your sale closes, the manufacturer quietly wires money back to the dealership, typically somewhere between 2 and 3% of the sticker price. On Marcus's $31,400 car, a 2% holdback puts an extra $628 back in the dealership's pocket. At 3%, that's $942. So while Marcus believes the store cleared $40 off him, In reality, the holdback alone puts them at 15 to 23 times that amount, and we've barely scratched the surface. Next comes something the industry calls dealer cash. If a factory overbuilt a certain trim and needs it gone fast, they'll quietly pay the dealership a bonus to steer buyers toward that specific unit. You will never know if your car came with one of these bonuses attached. After that sits the volume bonus, sometimes referred to as a stair-step incentive. Sell more units, earn a bigger multiplier. Cross a certain threshold, and suddenly every car sold in that window pays out extra. This, by the way, explains why salespeople get noticeably softer near the last week of the month or the final days of a quarter. It's not generosity. They're chasing a volume cliff that could be worth tens of thousands across their whole lot. Then there's the regional rebate. If a certain area is oversaturated with competing dealerships, or the local economy is dragging, manufacturers will quietly inject extra incentive money into that region to keep cars moving. Unless you're on the inside, you'd never know this program even exists. And finally, on the acquisition side, there's floor plan support. When a dealership takes delivery of a car, they finance that inventory, usually through a loan, and that loan carries interest. Floor plan support means the manufacturer covers part of that interest cost, quietly lowering the dealership's real cost even further below the invoice number. One more bucket worth naming is the back-end incentive program, tied to things like customer satisfaction scores and brand standards rather than to any single sale. It's not attached directly to your transaction, but it's still another channel pushing money from factory to dealership. Here's the twist, though. Even if you sat down and calculated every one of these hidden layers to the dollar and used all of it in your negotiation, you still wouldn't be anywhere close to where the real profit lives. The real number gets made in a room you haven't walked into yet. Before we go there, let's ground everything in numbers you can actually verify, not guesses. Several car dealership groups are publicly traded, meaning they're legally required to publish detailed financial filings. Names like Group 1 Automotive, Sonic Automotive, and Asbury Automotive, chains with hundreds of stores between them. Because they answer to shareholders, their filings spell out exactly how the money flows, and the pattern is remarkably consistent. Average gross profit on a new vehicle, meaning what you pay minus the invoice cost, lands around $3,100. On a used vehicle, it's closer to $1,950. But gross profit isn't the whole story, because the dealership still covers rent, payroll, utilities, lot upkeep, everything accountants lump into overhead. Strip that out, and net profit per vehicle typically falls somewhere between $450 and $1,150. That's the number that makes Marcus feel clever. He negotiated to $40 above invoice, while the average buyer hands over $3,100 above it. Marcus genuinely beat the average buyer on the showroom floor. But the showroom floor was never where the real money got made. The dealership wasn't finished with him, not even close. Marcus thinks the deal is done. Handshake, agreed number, paperwork left to sign. He gets walked down a short hallway into a smaller office to, quote, finish up the details. This room quietly generates more profit than anywhere else in the building, and almost every buyer strolls in with their guard completely down. The person behind that desk carries the title Finance Manager, but don't let the title fool you into thinking paperwork clerk. This is often the single highest earning role in the entire store, and there's a reason they sit in a private office instead of out on the lot. That's where the real number gets built. According to those same public filings, dealerships typically clear somewhere between $1,900 and $2,700 per vehicle in that finance office alone, stacked on top of whatever they already made selling you the car. Let's take that number apart piece by piece. First is the rate markup, sometimes called the reserve. When you finance through the dealership, the interest rate you're quoted isn't just whatever the lender approved. The dealership tacks on their own markup. Lender approves you at 4.5%, dealership might quote you 5.5%. That extra percentage point is pure profit for them, and across their financed sales, it typically adds up to $550 to $750 per car. Next up is the extended service contract, handed to you with a glossy brochure listing everything it supposedly covers, conveniently light on what it excludes. Margin on that product usually runs $650 to $950. Then there's loan gap coverage. This one's actually worth understanding on its own merits. Finance a car and total it in an accident. Your insurer only pays what the car is currently worth, not what you still owe. If your loan balance sits above the car's value, you cover that difference yourself. Gap coverage closes that hole, and it's not a scam product if you're financing heavily. The built-in margin runs $200 to $380. After that come the smaller add-ons: wheel and tire protection, paint sealant, floor mats, fabric treatment. Individually, they're minor, $0 to $280 in margin apiece, but stacked together, they add real weight. Total finance and protection profit out of that one office typically lands between $1,700 and $1,950 per car. But that office isn't finished yet either. There's still the paperwork stack, and buried inside it sits another $650 to $780 in margin. The documentation fee alone, charged for entering your details into their system and printing your contract, runs $380 to $620. Electronic filing and registration processing adds $35 to $85 above the actual government cost. The temporary tag, that paper taped to your back window until real plates arrive, tacks on another $20 to $45. Digital signing and notarization fees add roughly $10 to $25 more. None of these numbers look enormous individually, but together, the paperwork alone contributes $650 to $780 in pure margin per vehicle. Add it all together, finance and protection product plus documentation profit puts that single office somewhere between $2,350 and $2,730 per car. And that's before you even touch the service department, which is arguably the most profitable part of the whole dealership and deserves its own breakdown entirely. So here's Marcus's full picture. He negotiated the price down to $40 above invoice, felt fantastic about it, and the dealership still walked away with roughly $630 to $940 in holdback, several hundred more spread across the other front-end incentive programs, and then another $2,350 to $2,730 out of the finance office. All on a deal where the salesman claimed they were barely breaking even. That's the machine, running exactly the way it's built to run. Now, quick question worth sitting with for a second. If the number on your invoice slip was never actually the number that mattered, what else in that building have you been trusting at face value? Let's get back to Jordan. Same dealership, same car, same month. Jordan walked in and said the same 4 words that felt powerful to him: cash buyer, best price. In his head, that was leverage. No loans, no games, straight transaction. Here's what the dealership actually heard. You're about to erase $1,900 to $2,700 of profit from our finance office. No rate markup, no gap coverage, no service contract upsell. The single most profitable layer of the entire transaction just evaporated before the conversation even began. So the store did the only thing left available to it. It clawed that margin back through the sticker price. Jordan got less room to negotiate, the salesperson held firm longer, and Jordan drove away having paid $2,250 more for the identical car sitting in his neighbor's driveway. This is the part that catches people off guard. We're taught that cash is leverage everywhere. Pay cash for a kitchen remodel, the contractor knocks something off. Pay cash at a small shop, they might shave the price because cash means no card fees and no waiting on a bank. A car dealership doesn't operate like that, because financing itself is the actual product they're selling. The loan is an overhead to them, it's a revenue engine. Take that engine away, and you haven't simplified anything. You've removed their most valuable income stream. Here's a detail worth noticing too. Dealerships charge fees for practically everything: processing, registration markup, notary costs, yet almost none of them charge a loan origination fee. Why would they skip the one obvious fee? Because they want you financing through them in the first place. The real money isn't in a one-time charge, it's in the monthly payments and everything bundled around them. Some people hear all this and think the fix is simple. Just don't tell them you're paying cash, keep them guessing. Good instinct, but the dealership is already ahead of that move. There's a built-in sequence of checkpoints designed specifically to figure out whether you're a financing buyer or a cash buyer, and most people never notice they're being tested at all. Checkpoint 1 happens before you meet a single salesperson. Someone at the front desk hands you a clipboard, asking your name, contact details, the model you're interested in, whether you plan to finance or pay cash, whether there's a trade-in. Feels like a formality. It isn't. That clipboard is the very first filter in the system. Checkpoint 2 arrives roughly 2/3 of the way through your visit. They tell you they need to run your credit to confirm eligibility. Sounds routine. But at that stage, they're not really evaluating your credit worthiness. They're confirming you still intend to finance. It's a commitment check dressed up as procedure. Checkpoint 3 happens when the salesperson starts filling out a loan application before you've even sat down in the finance office. By this point, you've confirmed financing intent 2 or 3 separate times without realizing it. Write undecided on that clipboard, and the entire dynamic shifts. The further along you go without locking into financing, the less room the dealership gives you on price. Your leverage shrinks at every single checkpoint. So here's the real question. If paying with cash actually costs you more, and the store is quietly testing your intentions at every stage, what's the actual move? The strategy turns out to be far simpler than most people expect. Step 1. Walk in presenting yourself as a financing buyer and never bring up cash at any point in the process. That single choice keeps you classified as a high-value customer, which hands you maximum leverage on every line item in the deal. Step 2. At the clipboard stage, ask one specific question. What's your loan origination fee? They'll assume you're comparison shopping their loan terms against your own bank, but what you're really doing is confirming there's no upfront fee waiting to bite you if you pay the loan off early. Step 3. Negotiate the purchase price as aggressively as you can. The dealership will give you noticeably more room than they'd give a declared cash buyer because they're planning to recover their margin later in the finance office. Use that expectation against them. Step 4. Once you're sitting in that back office, negotiate the finance and protection products directly. You already know the margins now. Roughly $650 to $950 sits inside the service contract, meaning it's negotiable. Roughly $200 to $380 sits inside gap coverage, also negotiable. You're not obligated to buy every product on that desk, and whatever you do want, you're not obligated to pay full sticker for it either. Step 5. Before signing anything, read the loan contract line by line. Every legitimate charge should appear clearly under finance charges or loan fees. If a cost isn't listed there, it shouldn't exist at all. Most critically, confirm there's no prepayment penalty anywhere in the document. Step 6. Sign the financing, drive the car home, and pay the loan off in full within a day or two, maybe a week at most. Technically, you financed the vehicle, just not for long. You captured the financing buyer pricing, sidestepped the cash buyer penalty, and settled the loan before any meaningful interest could accumulate. The whole strategy rests on exactly 2 conditions holding true: 0 origination fee, 0 prepayment penalty. If either one exists, the math shifts, and you'd need to weigh whether the price savings still outweigh that cost. In most cases they do, but always run the actual numbers, because that's the step people skip and regret skipping. The showroom floor feels like where the real fight happens, the back and forth, the manager walking over, the tension of holding your number. It isn't. The finance office is where the real profit lives, and nearly every buyer walks in there believing the hard part is behind them, guard fully down, ready to sign whatever's placed in front of them. That's precisely what the dealership is counting on. Marcus never saw any of this coming, so he negotiated a genuinely strong number on the surface and then handed most of that advantage right back in the room behind the showroom. Jordan saw even less of it, because announcing cash up front cost him his leverage before the conversation even started, leaving him $2,250 poorer for the exact same car parked next door. Now you can see every layer, every rough number behind it, and the exact sequence to turn all of it in your favor the next time you walk onto a lot.